And then he would just buy expensive underwear. It's all I saw. He lived in his apartment until much later, till the late 80s, the dawn of crack. I just never thought of him as a drunk or an addict. He just seemed from another moment, holding a glass. I didn't understand his poetry as good. He had a Tiffany blue book that Dia published. "Look at my book," he said. I was jealous. They supported him, for God's sakes. He wrote about boys, and in one poem they were all in a painting of Caravaggio's, and the last line was, "They pile. Like experiences don't end, they pile up." I didn't understand why that was so important. Then he had a boyfriend named Tony, and they actually had shit fights in the halls of his building, which was everyone's building, Allen Ginsberg's, and then he burned his apartment down inside of that building. Electricity had already been off for a year, and he had candles that caused the fire, and then his home was gone. There was a party once at a place called Indochine, and Julian Schnabel and Andy and Basquiat and Keith Haring and Lauren Hutton and Pat Hearn and a beehive singing, they were all there. It was sort of a heaven place, not mine, but one of them. If vanishing is one of the requirements of heaven, souls being eaten by their own brightness, it was definitely accomplished there. Julian Schnabel standing in a chair talking about this good food. He was actually holding a little bowl of it and eating while he talked. Rene had like a Nehru hat on, and he was skipping around the crowd like a butterfly, but he was stinging everyone. I saw it as a court, and he was the jester. He was at work, but he was so light. I remember when Rene would ring the bell and come up into Ted and Alice's house. That was my favorite feeling in the world, to be already inside and see who came in. Rene was one of my favorite people, and they liked him too. If you saw him in the street, you would stop for an hour. You'd go get a coffee. He would decide that you should go to this opening or bar with him. He was in my house and their house, Berrigan, Schnabel, Myles. He was a carrier. I'd see Ted standing in the street talking to Kathy Acker. Ted was a carrier too. He'd be carrying drugs or a bit of gossip. He'd be walking down the street with books to sell. Kathy would get all bright and look like a little girl. Ted was carrying her childhood, the story of Kathy when she first came to town, or the time that she came to Iowa with some man she was dating, and Ted was nice, which he always was. You would see each person through the other person's eyes. She just needed to be seen as young or nice or new. He needed to be a member of everybody's families. I'd go from this house with a bottle of pills, and I'd stop in this bar, and she'd pour me a drink, and I'd walk to the payphone and call her, and we'd go over there, and when she got out of work, we'd take acid and wind up back at her place in the middle of the night, or with him and both of them, unbelievably, all in bed together, and they were so thin in L.A. And then he told me an awful story about her when she had a girlfriend and what happened when they lived on St. Mark's Place in his building before they lived there. I remember one day jumping in a cab, and I knew I had been in this cab before. I remembered the man's name, and I stuck my hands in my suit jacket, and I had a few cigarettes left in one pocket, and then I discovered another pack in the other. I must be living twice. That was my job, for Christ's sake, to actually keep track of these things. It seemed to me there was a rhythm, like the year I noticed 33, and it was everywhere. It was the age Hart Crane died. The bus taking me to L.A. for the first time to read, and I thought I would die, and I nearly did. When I had the new old green coat with fur on the collar, I had friends in two competing households, and they liked to talk about each other since they didn't talk anymore. They had both seemed like perfectly good households. I liked being in both. Pat would invite me over for drinks before the dinner guests arrived. He wanted me there early to drink, which makes sense. I was naturally going to a reading. I had some hot pink flyers in my bag of where I was going, and they liked how I looked when I came in. And by the time I left, everybody was roaring, and they really liked my outfit, and the dinner people were coming, and they were mostly Outworld, and I was his and her young punk, a genius. And for that, I was fed and felt seen, and went out a little loaded into the bright cold. We were carrying the message day and night for about 10 years. That's about all you get. The houses are open. All you need is about 3 of you to go everywhere and make these gauzy invisible strings between people. It just makes sense that so many of us had time during the day and would stand in one another's kitchen smoking and talking and watching our faces change in the light. Thanks. No.